And she said, Loren, I do this every single day. And I'll do it every day for the rest of my life. Because the stuff that we've been walking around with since we were 2 years old, it's not likely to go away tomorrow. We can deal with it on certain levels, but we don't necessarily completely resolve it. And so I can remember the first time I did conscious personal growth work, like a program to try to, and issues with my mother came up. And at the end of the weekend I thought, well, thank God I got that handled. That's done now, right? And then about 9 months later, I did another program that was more conscious personal growth work. And guess what? The same issues came up. I thought that was done. And so people talk about how it's like peeling an onion. You peel one layer of it off, but guess what? There's 20 more layers. And we may have to keep going at it and keep bringing that consciousness to it. And it really is just bringing consciousness to it. We don't have to fix anything. We just have to be willing to be aware of what's going on. So I did a program. There's an amazing book written by a friend of mine called Calling in the One. And it's about finding a soulmate, supposedly. Now, you have a partner, and maybe you're not interested in a partner. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you have it, because the book does, thank you, forgot about that. The book does exactly what it promises to do, kind of. It doesn't necessarily call in somebody else. It calls in the one, you. See, many of us never find a soulmate because we're not being ourselves. How are you ever going to find your perfect soul partner if you're not actually manifesting your own true self? You're going to be attracting people who are attracted to who you're pretending to be, the masks and costumes that you're wearing, and then be surprised when that doesn't work. So I took a course with Catherine, the author of this book, Calling in the One, and it was an interesting thing because there were more than 1,000 people taking this course online, teleseminar kind of thing, and mostly people 40s, 50s, 60s. Some, the youngest person I think was 17 or 18, and there were people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, but mostly 40s, 50s, 60s. Mostly people that, they'd had a fair amount of life experience. Most people were pretty successful in one or many areas of their life. And yet every single person I spoke with or heard speak on the program when they had a chance to share, everybody was dealing with and uncovered as a result of this course subconscious, completely disempowering beliefs that they're walking around with their whole life until this point and never knew were there. I mean, it's pretty hard to create what you want when there's something inside of you, some program that's been there since you were a little child, partly as a result perhaps of what happened with your parents, not that they intended it, but that's the result. Saying that program, telling you all the time, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. Well, it's going to be pretty hard to create what you want if that's what you're constantly telling yourself. I was originally attracted to the book because I was hoping to find a partner. And I realized as a result of taking this program that my constantly running, ongoing program said, I'm unlovable. Well, it's going to be pretty hard to create a romantic relationship when that's the program. And as a result of that program, when it's my 2-year-old self, that inner 2-year-old, that's actually having all my relationships with women, that's what's showing up. Because that's what's coming up in that situation. That's where I was wounded. Now, each of us, if we're willing to admit it, has something similar going on. And if we're willing to do the work to get to the bottom of it, there's amazing opportunities for growth. That's why I said to each of you, either in writing or on the telephone or both, the hardest thing about this fasting process is usually the emotional piece. Because most of our lives, most of us, are trying to avoid feeling these very painful feelings. We spend our whole life trying to avoid them. We've used food, we've used drugs, maybe pornography, maybe face crack, whatever it is. All these different things that we do to not actually be with ourselves. Because what happens when you get quiet and still enough, the stuff starts to bubble up to the surface. And the ego says, believes that it can't handle it. That it will perish if it has to experience this stuff. It will become annihilated. Will it? No. For better or worse, I don't think we can destroy the ego. It's always going to be there. What we can do, though, is create a relationship with it where it's more proportional, more reasonable, where its voice is heard, but it's not in control. We're not operating from fear, which is unfortunately how most people operate most of the time. For some people, it's fear of failure, and for some people, it's fear of success. For some, whatever it is, it's often, and if you look at marketing, the marketers know this very well. So that's how they sell most of the time. It's fear. If you don't buy this, you will suffer these dire consequences. That's the underlying message behind much of what we're seeing. Because fear is such a powerful motivator for most of us. I think it was Roosevelt who said there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Fear is okay. Fear is actually beneficial to us in many cases. When I was in high school, and some of my friends were doing some of the stupidest things you could imagine, fear probably saved my life sometimes. Like even after college, I had a roommate that he was a climber. I was a rock climber too. But he would go out at night and scale the side of office buildings in downtown Bethesda. No ropes, no equipment, no gear. He'd just climb up the side of the building. You want to come? He would say. Yeah, you go ahead. I was afraid of falling onto the sidewalk, splitting my head open. It probably saved my life. There's no doubt he was a better climber than I was. But fear probably saved my life. I had another roommate. These guys became quite good friends. You'll understand why. He was a kayaker who just missed making the American Olympic team. And the team was all based in the D.C. area. They practiced in the D.C. area. They had an amazing facility that the Potomac Electric Power Company built for them to use. But outside of Washington, D.C., there's a place called Great Falls between Maryland and Virginia on the Potomac River. Pretty good-sized waterfalls. John would go paddle over the falls at night by himself in the winter. Any one of those things, doing this by yourself, that's not smart. Doing this at night, that's not so smart. Doing this in the winter when the water is 33 degrees, and if you get wet, you're going to freeze to death quick. And he would do this pretty consistently, like once or twice a week. He'd go out there and paddle this thing by himself at night. You want to come? Yeah, no thanks. Okay, so my fear probably kept me alive on many occasions. But oftentimes, the next time fear comes up for you, ask yourself, this is what I do. I learned. I'll tell you how I learned, but I learned in high school to ask myself, what's the worst that could happen? What if I actually did that thing? I'll tell you what happened. It's kind of humorous. It's maybe not. Kind of sad. I was a junior in high school. It was the end of the year. The last 6 months of the year. I was completely in love with, I had a crush on this beautiful senior. And all my friends kept telling me, don't waste your time. She would never go out with you. Seniors are going to date seniors or even college guys. She's not going to date a guy younger than herself. Don't waste your time. Well, the seniors finished school a couple weeks earlier than the rest of us. And so she was gone. And one of her best friends, who was a junior, came up to me one day after they were gone and said, you know, she really liked you. I thought, you know, why didn't I ask her out? Why didn't I?
Fear.
Say again?
Fear.
Fear. I was afraid. Well, and so I realized, what was the worst thing that could have happened? I mean, the very worst that could have happened. You know, she could have said, I mean, if she had like been really cruel, and she was a beautiful, nice person, but the worst that could have happened, she might have said, you're the ugliest, stupidest, smelliest person in the world. If you were the only boy in the world, I wouldn't go out with you. That's the worst that could have happened. That's not that likely. And even if that had happened, I'd have survived. I'd have bounced back eventually, right? It might have taken me a week or a month, maybe a year, but I'd have bounced back.
A couple minutes.
A couple minutes maybe, right? You know? But how often are you being stopped by fear when, what's the worst that's going to happen? You might get embarrassed. You might get rejected in some way. I mean, so what? I also came to realize that if someone wasn't smart enough to want to be with me, why would I want to be with her? Right? It's got to be a good fit, right? So you don't really want someone that doesn't want you. If someone's not interested, perfect. Better to know now and move on. There's really nothing to lose. But we're afraid. And not just in that situation, in lots of situations. You know, yesterday on my Facebook page, someone said, Thanksgiving, I'll be a vegan for 2 years. And a bunch of people had commented, and I wrote and said, on Thanksgiving, I don't remember what day I became a vegan, but I'm a vegan now, 25 years, and 21 years raw on Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving was my last cooked meal 21 years ago. My last regularly scheduled cooked meal 21 years ago. Next day, no more. And quite a few people commented on that. That's amazing. I said, you know, for me, the most amazing part is where that last 25 years is gone since I became a vegan. More than about half my life now. I mean, the last I remember, I was 25 years old. And Robert, you can probably attest to this, but my own experience and many people's experiences is that the older we get, the faster it goes. Especially true. Well, hopefully it's not true for you, because the more conscious we are, the less true that is. If we're conscious in every moment,